In 1943, a coal miner's widow in Fayette County, Pennsylvania, raised 6 grandchildren on $14 a week and a quarter-acre of dirt. Her son was overseas. Her daughter-in-law worked nights at the mill, so the children came to her. She baked their bread, canned their winter, sewed their clothes, and cut their hair on the back porch with a pair of clippers she had owned since 1921. She never bought what she could make. She never threw away what she could mend. When she died in 1968, her granddaughter inherited the sewing basket and could not thread the needle. Most of what that woman knew died in the room with her. They did not manage a household. They ran a small economy with 2 hands and a stove. Every skill they owned was a bill they never had to pay. Those skills held families together through depressions, wars, and winters when the money ran out in the second week. We let go of every one of them the moment a store could do it for us. This was not thrift. This was self-reliance, learned young and carried for life. Every loaf baked was a loaf not bought. Every sock darned was a sock not replaced. When the convenient years arrived, we called these skills old-fashioned and paid strangers to do them instead. We did not lose this knowledge because it failed. We lost it because we stopped wanting to be the kind of people who needed it. Number 19 on this list is something modern kitchens scrape into the garbage every single week, and it once stretched a single chicken across 3 more meals. Number 16 clothed 4 children for a year and cost a family nothing but thread. And number 2, the skill that kept more families off relief than any program in Washington, was once known by every child before the age of 10. These 25 skills were not chores. They were power. The power to feed a family when the cupboard was bare and the bank account was emptier. They were the difference between a household that weathered a hard year and one that came apart. Hit that subscribe button. Let us count down the 25 forgotten frugal skills that died with our grandmothers and that we desperately need back. Number 25, baking the week's bread. No family bought a loaf when a sack of flour cost a fraction of one. This skill ran on muscle memory, not measuring cups. You mixed flour, water, yeast, and salt by feel. You kneaded until the dough pushed back. You let it rise by the warm stove, knocked it down, and baked it. A 5-pound bag of flour cost 30 cents and made a dozen loaves. A bakery loaf cost a dime apiece. The math was never close. For a grandmother feeding a houseful, Saturday baking filled the kitchen with a warmth no furnace gave. The children knew the smell before they were awake. In mill towns through the 1940s, a woman who could not bake was rare and quietly pitied. She did not buy bread. She made the house smell like it was safe. Number 24, putting up the harvest. When food was cheap, you did not eat it. You sealed it in glass for the months when it was dear. Every August, the kitchen turned into a canning line. Tomatoes, beans, corn, and peaches went into mason jars by the dozen. A bushel of tomatoes cost $2 in season and became 40 jars worth 10 times that in February. For a farm grandmother, canning week was exhausting and almost holy. It was the difference between buying winter and owning it outright. Appalachian and farm families canned not as a hobby, but as insurance against a hungry March. They did not shop for January. They built January in August and shelved it in rows.
Before we go on, I made something special for you. Guides for people like us who still believe the old ways mattered. They're the forgotten money habits our grandparents lived by, tricks that could save you thousands a year. But this knowledge is disappearing. And once it's gone for good. I've put together 2 books for you, plus a free bonus. Scan the QR code on screen now, or click the link below. I'll wait right here.
Number 23. Making soap from saved fat. The grease that modern kitchens pour down the drain was once the raw material for a year of clean. You saved every scrap of rendered fat in a crock, then cooked it with lye into hard bars of soap. A batch made enough to wash bodies, dishes, and floors for months. A store bar cost a dime, and a large family burned through 3 or 4 dozen bars a year. This batch cost nothing but the kitchen's own leftovers and an afternoon of careful work. A single rendering replaced $10 of store soap with garbage she had been saving anyway. For a depression-raised grandmother, buying soap felt close to foolish when the makings sat in her own grease crock. Rural Southern and mountain women passed the recipe down by memory, never by paper. They did not see garbage in that fat. They saw next year's washing already paid for. Number 22. Sewing from a pattern. A dress in the store cost $8. The same dress made at home from a paper pattern cost $2. Every capable woman owned a machine and a tin of tissue patterns. You bought 1.5 yards of fabric, pinned the pattern, and made the dress over a weekend. A grandmother who sewed dressed 4 granddaughters for the price of dressing 1. For her, the machine was not a craft. It was a clothing store she owned and ran herself. Through the 1940s and 1950s, the home sewing machine was the most quietly powerful appliance in the house. They did not buy the wardrobe. They manufactured it, one Sunday afternoon at a time. Number 21. Darning and reweaving. A hole in a sock was not the end of a sock. It was an evening's work. Every household kept a darning egg and a basket of wool. You slid the wooden egg into the heel, wove the thread across the gap, and the sock lived another winter. A pair of work socks cost 35 cents. A spool of darning wool mended 40 pairs. For the grandmother of a half-dozen children, mending night was an hour by the radio with busy hands and a quiet mind. In coal towns and factory cities, the sewing basket sat in every front room. They did not discard what could be saved. They saved it, and they slept fine. Number 20. The lard tin. Beside every stove sat a tin, and into it went every drop of rendered fat. That fat was the cooking grease for the rest of the week. Eggs fried in it. Greens were seasoned with it. Pie crust was made flaky by it. A tin of store lard cost $0.25. The grease tin refilled itself for nothing because the meat had already been bought and eaten. In Southern and working-class kitchens, pouring fat away was unthinkable. The tin on the stove was free flavor and a free memory of leaner years. Nothing fried tasted better. Nothing cost less. Number 19. Stock from the bones. The carcass that modern kitchens throw out was once the start of 3 more meals. After the chicken was eaten, the bones went into a pot with water, an onion, and whatever scraps were on hand. Hours later, you had stock for soup, gravy, and the base of a dozen dinners. The bones cost nothing. They had already been paid for with the bird. A single chicken that fed the family once on Sunday fed them again on Wednesday in a pot of soup. A $1 bird became 4 dinners, and the last one was the richest. Farm and immigrant grandmothers built whole weeks of eating around one animal, fully used. They did not bury the bones. They retired them slowly, with honor, into the soup pot. Number 18. Knitting and crocheting. Cold weather did not send you to a store. It sent you to a basket of yarn. A grandmother knitted the sweaters, the mittens, the caps, and the heavy winter socks. A skein of wool cost a dime. A store sweater cost $3 and rarely fit a growing child for 2 winters. The knitted one was let out and handed down for years. For her, the click of needles by lamplight was the sound of the family being kept warm, one row at a time. Through hard winters in the north, a woman who could knit dressed her whole family against the snow for the cost of wool. They did not buy warmth, they made it, stitch by stitch. Number 17, quilting from scraps. Nothing wore out so completely that it could not become a blanket. Worn shirts, outgrown dresses, and the good parts of ruined trousers were cut into squares and saved. When enough were gathered, the women pieced them into a quilt that would outlast everyone in the room. A store blanket cost money. A scrap quilt cost only the rags you already owned and the hours you gave it. For a grandmother, every square held a memory. A child's first dress, a husband's old work shirt. Quilting bees stitched whole communities together across farm country. They did not throw away worn cloth. They turned it into the warmest thing in the house. Here is what nobody talks about. These women were not born frugal. They were trained by fear. Almost every grandmother running a kitchen in the 1940s had been a child or a young mother during the Depression. She had watched a parent lose a farm, a job, or a house. That fear never left when the good years came. It went underground and turned into skill. The bread, the soap, the darning egg, these were not quaint hobbies. They were the scar tissue of people who had once gone without and swore their children never would. We inherited the comfort they built and threw away the competence that built it. We kept the warm house and lost every hand skill that had once kept it warm for free. They were so good at hiding the struggle that we grew up never seeing it. Then we mistook never seeing it for it never having been real. Number 16, sewing from feed sacks. Flour and feed came in printed cotton sacks, and the cotton was worth more than the flour. Mills figured this out and started printing the sacks in florals and gingham on purpose. A thrifty grandmother saved every sack, matched the patterns, and sewed them into dresses, shirts, and curtains. 4 sacks made a child's dress. A store dress cost $2. The sacks cost nothing, already paid for with the flour. A family clothed 4 children a year on sacks alone and kept the $40 those dresses would have cost. For a grandmother during the war, this was dignity stitched out of packaging. The neighbors saw a pretty dress, not a flour bag. They did not buy the cloth. They wore what the groceries came wrapped in. Number 15, pickling and fermenting. Vegetables that would have rotted in a week lasted a year in a crock of brine. You packed cucumbers, cabbage, and beans into salt and water and let time do the work. A crock of sauerkraut cost a few cents of cabbage and salt and fed a family all winter. Store pickles cost real money and held a fraction of what the crock did. For a grandmother, the pickle crock in the cellar was a pantry that ran itself. Eastern European and German immigrant families brought this skill across an ocean and kept it alive in American basements. It was not a delicacy. It was vegetables made to outlast the season they grew in. Number 14, resoling shoes. A worn-out sole was a repair, not a reason to buy new shoes. Families kept a cobbler's last, a metal foot-shaped form, in the cellar. You cut a new sole from scrap leather or an old tire and tacked it on at the kitchen table. A new pair of work boots cost $6. A sheet of sole leather cost 40 cents and saved 3 pairs. For the grandfather of the house, resoling was a Sunday job done with a mouthful of tacks and a steady hand. Through the Depression, the man who could fix his own shoes never walked to town in the cold for new ones. They did not throw away a good boot over a bad sole. They gave it a new bottom and another year. Number 13, sharpening every blade. A dull knife was not replaced. It was sharpened on a stone kept by the back door. Knives, scissors, axes, and the lawn shears all got their edge restored by hand. A whetstone cost a quarter and lasted a lifetime. A new knife cost $1 and was never needed because the old one cut like new every Sunday. For a grandmother, a sharp knife was the difference between an easy supper and a fought one. Every farm and working household treated the sharpening stone as a tool you simply owned, like a hammer. They did not buy a new blade. They brought the old one back to life on a piece of stone. Number 12. Caning and reupholstering. A broken chair was not set on the curb. It was rebuilt. A grandmother rewove a caned seat with reed soaked soft in water, or recovered a worn cushion with fabric from the scrap basket. A new kitchen chair cost $4. A bundle of caning reed cost 30 cents and saved a whole set. For her, a tired chair was a quiet afternoon and a like-new seat by supper. Furniture in those homes was meant to last generations, not seasons, and the skill to renew it kept it in service for decades. A good chair outlived the child who first sat in it. They did not replace the chair. They gave it a new seat and sat back down. Number 11. Mixing your own cleaning supplies. A whole house was kept clean on baking soda, vinegar, and a bar of the soap she had made herself. There was no aisle of bottles. There was a box, a jug, and knowledge. Vinegar cleaned the windows. Baking soda scrubbed the pots. A dime's worth of both cleaned a house for a month. For a grandmother, store cleansers were a tax on something her own pantry already did better. Before the chemical companies built an aisle for every surface, every woman knew the handful of staples that cleaned everything. They did not buy a different bottle for every job. They bought 2 cheap things and knew how to use them. Number 10. The real kitchen garden. A patch of yard was not decoration. It was the grocery bill, cut in half. A grandmother grew tomatoes, beans, greens, squash, and herbs in a plot no bigger than a parlor. A packet of seeds cost a nickel and returned a summer of vegetables worth $30. The garden fed the family fresh all summer and filled the canning jars for winter. For her, the morning walk through the rows was both labor and peace. During the war, these victory gardens fed a nation while the farms fed the troops. They did not drive to the store for a tomato. They walked to the back fence and picked one. In 1949, a grandmother in a small Ohio town spent maybe 15 minutes a day on small acts of prevention. She oiled the hinges, she honed the knives, she rubbed wax into the leather and turned the mattress. Her yearly cost for all of it was close to nothing. Today, the average family spends over $4,000 a year on repairs and replacements. 15 minutes a day would have prevented most of them. We did not get poorer at these skills. We got convinced our time was too valuable to spend on them. So we pay strangers to do what our grandmothers did between dinner and the evening news. The work did not disappear. The knowing how disappeared. And the bill for forgetting comes due every single year. Number 9. Saving seed. The garden did not start at a store each spring. It started in an envelope from last fall. A grandmother let the best tomato, the strongest bean, and the finest squash go to seed, then dried and saved those seeds for next year. A packet of store seed cost a nickel. Saved seed cost nothing and came from the plants that had already proven themselves in her own soil. For her, the seed envelopes in the drawer were next year's whole garden, free and waiting. Farm families kept seed lines going for generations, each one suited to their exact patch of ground. They did not buy the garden every spring. They carried it forward, one envelope at a time. Number 8. Root cellaring. Before the freezer, the cellar kept the harvest alive all winter. Potatoes, carrots, apples, and onions were packed in sand and straw in the cool dark below the house. The cold floor cost nothing to run. It held a winter of food that a store would have charged a fortune to replace in January. For a grandmother, a trip down the cellar steps in February was a trip to a pantry she had filled herself in October. Through the northern winters, the root cellar was the reason a family ate vegetables when the ground was frozen solid. They did not buy winter produce. They stored the fall and walked downstairs to it. Number 7. Cutting the family's hair. No child saw a barber until he was old enough to argue about it. A barbershop cut cost $1.50. A pair of clippers cost $6 once and cut hair for 15 years. On Saturday morning, a chair went out on the porch and the children took their turn. A grandmother cutting a houseful of hair saved $70 a year on haircuts alone. For her, it was 10 minutes and a small ritual under the morning sun. It was never about looking poor. The children looked fine. It was about refusing to pay a stranger for what 2 hands could do at home. Number 6. Stretching 1 chicken across a week. A single bird was not a single meal. It was the spine of 7 days. Sunday it was roasted whole. Monday the leftover meat went into a pot pie. Wednesday the bones became soup. By the end, a 4-pound chicken that cost $1 had appeared on the table again and again. For a grandmother feeding 9, this was how meat showed up all week on a budget that allowed it once. The children never knew the budget allowed it once. They only knew the table was never bare. It was not the same dinner reheated. It was one bird, respected from the wishbone to the broth. Farm and immigrant kitchens built whole weeks around one animal. They did not buy meat for every meal. They made one purchase carry 7. Number 5. Cooking by feel, wasting nothing. There was no recipe card and no measuring cup. There was a grandmother who knew. She cooked by the look of the dough, the smell of the pot, and the memory in her hands. Nothing was thrown out. Stale bread became pudding. Wilting vegetables became soup. The last of everything became tomorrow's something. A kitchen run this way produced almost no garbage and almost no waste. For her, leftovers were not a problem. They were the next meal, already half made. This was knowledge that lived in the body, not in a book, and it took a lifetime to build. They did not follow recipes. They cooked, and they fed everyone, and they wasted nothing. Number 4. Repair before replace. When something broke, the first question was never where to buy a new one. It was whether it could be fixed. A toaster, a lamp, a clock, a radio. All of it was opened, studied, and mended. A new toaster cost $12. A new cord cost 40 cents. A grandfather who could rewire a lamp saved that lamp a dozen times over. It was never about being unable to afford new. It was about not paying for new until old was truly finished. In those homes, the broken thing went to the workbench, not the curb. They fixed first. They bought last. Most things never reached last. Number 3. Knowing quality. Buying it once. When something finally had to be bought, you bought the best you could afford and never bought it again. A grandmother could feel quality in her fingers, the weight of good cloth, the joint of a good chair, the heft of a good pan. A cheap coat cost $4 and died in a year. A good one cost $12 and lasted a decade. The careful family paid more once instead of less 5 times. For her, knowing quality was a skill, not a luxury. It saved a fortune over a lifetime. They understood that cheap things are the most expensive things because you buy them again and again and again. Number 2, making do. Before the age of 10, every child of that era knew how to make something out of almost nothing. A tin can became a cup, a crate became a stool, a worn coat was turned inside out and restitched into a new one. This was the master skill under all the others, the simple refusal to be stopped by not having. A grandmother could solve a problem with string, a nail, and a clear head, and never spend a cent. It kept more families off relief than any program ever did. For her, making do was not poverty. It was the quiet confidence that she would manage whatever came. A child raised on making do grew up unafraid of an empty hand. They did not wait for the money. They made do, and they got by, and they held on. Number 1, feeding a family from an empty cupboard. That is the skill all the others served. No recipe, no full pantry, no money in the jar, just a grandmother who could look at a near-bare shelf, a handful of flour, an onion, a few potatoes, and put a hot supper on the table for 9. Every other skill on this list, the bread, the garden, the stretched chicken, the saved fat, fed into this one moment. The empty cupboard came for every family eventually. The ones who survived it had a grandmother who did not panic at a bare shelf. She had done it before. She fed her family on nearly nothing, week after week, and made it look ordinary. It was not exciting. It was not clever. It was the whole point of everything else. None of these skills required a degree. None of them required a store, an advisor, or a subscription to anything. They required attention, patience, and a pair of willing hands. The grandmothers who held these skills understood something the decades since have spent a fortune trying to make us forget. Convenience is not the same as security. Buying a thing is not the same as being able to make it. The freedom to purchase anything you want means nothing once you have lost the ability to provide for yourself. These were not the skills of poor people. They were the skills of capable people, people who could not be stranded by an empty wallet because their hands were never empty. They fed families through wars and depressions with a garden, a needle, and a grease tin on the stove. We did not lose these skills because they stopped working. We lost them because a store offered to do each one for us, and we said yes, one skill at a time, until there were none left. The knowledge died with the women who carried it, but the hands were the same hands we have now. What they knew can be learned again, and the cupboard, sooner or later, comes for all of us.